For many reasons. The first one is that on public investment, we were pushing on mobility from years. And they give us money, great, but they give us money to realize project tomorrow. So you had to work mainly on the project you have. That is something, if I would go back to the European planning, I would think a little more, because if they tell you, I give you the money, but you should have the project ready to start in 6 months, probably it's not what I really need now, but it's what I was quite ready to do, but I didn't do with my money. So probably it was not the most necessary thing. But on mobility, we were pushing a lot. And so especially we went on tram lines, that is the right time of investment. And we focused on mobility as a service, trying also to use new driverless buses on protected lanes in the surface. The second important line is digital, and I think year after year, mobility and digital should be more and more connected. And on the other hand, actually, I'm in charge from 12 years. I started from mobility, that is still my great passion. But actually, I'm in charge of housing, so we are working to refurbish part of the public housing of the city. So this gives you the idea of, first that after 2 years of the start of the plan, half of the money, more than half of the money, is invested, and we are working and realizing the project. The other half is in tender, and hopefully till the end of the year, more or less, we should arrive around 90%. It is particularly problematic for a city, to take just the last minute. Sorry, I'm getting longer. So, I would push just on a point. We doubled the amount of the investment, but the same number of people is working on it. So it is there is a great personal job on the people working there, but it says also the difficulties to have an increase of the amount of investment with a structure that remain the same. That is a problem. Maybe you can obtain result if it's just for 5 years, but I would mention it as a matter. I stop, so I'm sorry.
All right, thank you so much. All right. Our next speaker, we have Charles de la Chevrotière, Senior Director, Executive Director of Business and Mobility Strategies, Montreal Sustainable Mobility Agency.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Very happy to be here this morning. I have prepared a deck that they will put on very quickly. I have little time, so I'll try to give you a short overview of what the new Sustainable Mobility Agency is and what we do in Montreal, as soon as the deck comes up. So essentially, we've been created by the City of Montreal to actually operate the curb. So we manage and enforce the curbside as well. Well, there's no, they're still working on it. Told you. I'm happy to begin.
in the nature of innovation, we're going to pivot.
Oh, we got it.
Never mind.
Thank you. All right, so making the curb work. Well, for those who don't know where Montreal is, we're on the east side of Canada, eastern side. To a population 2 million, region, the metropolitan area is about 4 million, half of Quebec, province of Quebec. Montreal loves its alternative mobility. We are the birth city of Big C. You might know it outside of Montreal as PBSC, Santander or Boris Bikes in London, City Bikes in New York. We have a big, strong car share community, Communauto, about 4,000 car. We had Teo Taxi, the first North American fully electric taxi fleet, and Montreal is implementing more than 200 kilometers of fully separated bike lanes. Essentially, like I started saying a bit during my introduction, so essentially Montreal, the city of Montreal created a paramunicipal organization. That's a very Canadian concept. So essentially we are a non-profit and our operating capital budget are both reviewed, approved, and provided by the city of Montreal. We also have an independent board, but all members are nominated by the city of Montreal. Also, what is very important is all the revenues that we collect are actually sent back to the city of Montreal. So all the decisions we take are not revenue driven, but they're all mobility driven. So essentially what the city did was putting all the parking management and enforcement, as well as public EV charging, innovation in practices, and vehicle for hire within under one umbrella organization. And we manage and enforce the curbside as well as the public parking. I won't go through all these numbers because I will be told that I need to cut down, but essentially we have about 1,500 EV, 1,500 EV charging station, 83% on the curb. Another number I would like for you to actually look at is lower right, more than 700,000 active users of our app. This is a digital asset that we want to leverage over the next few years. I will go through it in my presentation. So essentially, why were we created? Well, I always like to answer this question by looking at old pictures. About 100 years ago, our cities went through a mobility revolution, just as we're going through right now. So cities, streets were for everyone. But very quickly in the 20s, as we know, the streets were given actually to cars. And with cars came parking. Strangely, even though parking are in our cities for the last 100 years, we have absolutely or almost quite close to no knowledge on parking, no knowledge on the science of immobility. So it's a very fractured industry. It's been for the longest time a very anonymous industry. So we have very little, if not no information or knowledge about parking. But a sound parking management, we know that it can hit all the right objective that we're looking at. Make streets safer, improve mobility and accessibility, better share the street space, support economic vitality, and reduce energy consumption and GHG emissions. So one of the technology we're trying to leverage right now is LPR. We use it for enforcement, which, am I still on? Yeah. Parking enforcement, but also we're trying to build knowledge through it. So we capture the license plate and we're able to actually do some vehicle categorization, origins of vehicle, parking duration, occupation rates. That seems very simple, but occupation rates, nobody knows how to really calculate or measure the occupation rate of parking on street parking. So I was telling you a little bit before, we're hoping to actually leverage our payment app. As you all know, trip planners nowadays, they lie to motorists. They never give you the time related to parking. The car appears by magic in front of your house and disappears right at your destination. We all know it's not true. But for transit, for biking, for TNCs, it's always the right time, very precise. A lot is invested in giving the right time. What would happen if motorists would actually we were able to provide the right time associated to using the car, which would include parking? So information is really at the heart of our strategy, at the core of our strategy. And part of this information also is if we get more knowledge of how much is used, how the curb is used, and how off-street parking is being used and occupied, then we can actually start doing some real modular parking pricing, which nowadays is a concept more than something that actually works and can be implemented. And of course, well, what we call curbside management is what we used to call parking management. We know that for the same exact space on the street, you can have very different values in terms of parklets, paid parking, 18 cars a day in Montreal, EV charging, 3 cars a day in average. Public transportation, a big bus stop in Montreal, we're about 1,000 boarding and lighting per day on the high-frequency network, etc. But this is the state of our curbside in Montreal, and I know it's the same thing in many other cities throughout. There's very little knowledge about regulation on the curb, and everybody wants to manage the curb. So how do you manage something you don't understand? So essentially, this is my last slide. Some of our main issues that we have identified over the last 3 years trying to realize make our technological program happen. So essentially, like I said, absence of knowledge. There is no knowledge. Like I said, the industry is heavily fragmented. There's very little competition, actually, even though like there are more and more companies coming in. The technology that they provide is usually only 1 or 2. That technology is often immature still, so we go in RFPs, we're promised great accomplishment, and then we all are working together to actually develop the technology as we go. And of course, public procurement processes, especially in Canada and Quebec, they're very complicated. They don't help us doing innovation. So we're working on this. We have an innovation program that we put in place to actually facilitate this kind of innovation. But yeah, those are the main issues that we might be able to discuss during the panel. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we have Ian Harwick up next, Electrified Mobility Community Programs Administrator, Office of Climate Action, Sustainability and Resiliency, City and County of Denver. He's going to talk about successful e-bike voucher program, but what comes next? Tell us what comes next. Okay. I don't know.
Thanks, everyone. Ian Harwick here. So yes, I work for the City of Denver in the Office of Climate Action, Sustainability and Resiliency, which is an office that came into, was created during the pandemic. And later that year, November of 2020, the voters decided to pass a 0.25% sales tax on themselves, which gives our office $40 million a year to tackle climate change. About $6 million of that goes to the division that I'm in, which is Sustainable Mobility. And a few of you may have heard about an e-bike voucher program that we ran, or that we're still in the middle of running. We started it last year in April, and we dispersed about 4,500 e-bike vouchers, which led to then 4,500 e-bikes on the road. And then this year we're following that up with about 3,000 to 3,500, bringing us to about 8,000 new e-bikes on the streets of Denver, which is pretty insane considering that we went from, you know, a couple hundred to 8,000. And somebody from our Department of Transportation said all the bike lanes that we could have built would have never put the number of bikes on the road that you all have done. And so while this is great, some of the math that what I've realized lately is the 700,000 people that live in Denver, which, you know, makes us a medium-sized city, we do about 8 billion miles of miles driven every year. So, I mean, that is a gigantic hill that we have to tackle. And so what I'm, you know, sort of putting out there into the ether here is, you know, what do we do next? How do we begin to tackle that huge amount of vehicle miles traveled? You know, what are those ideas that we can do? And for me, and also like $6 million for our office, or for us, you know, is a lot more than a lot of people have, but it's still like chump change in the whole grand scheme of things. And so, you know, I'm thinking about what are the partnerships that we can build, what are the innovations that we can connect with, what are the research institutions that are pushing new ideas. And, you know, so for us, you know, things that we're doing next is we're going to put together an RFP for secured bike storage to begin to store those bikes. We're doing a micro grant program to allow communities to co-create their solutions. But again, these things, they're small and they're not going to get there. So my ask is, if you have ideas, if you have connections, if you have new technology, if you have anything, you know, I'd love to hear it, because we can't do this alone. We all have to work together, and we're already planning a nice trip. He's going to come to Denver. I'm going to go to Montreal. We're going to check out each other's stuff and see what's going on. And I think that building these relationships is so key, and I'm really excited. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Ian. All right, and then last but definitely not least, we have Michelle Stewart, Sustainability Director, Lisa Colicchio, Sustainability Director, and Michelle Stewart, Senior Manager, Special Projects, Metrolink, where they'll be talking about fuel efficiency software to reduce emissions and costs.
Good morning. Michelle and I are double teaming this pitch today, but just a little bit about Metrolink. Hopefully you'll have our slide. Perfect. But who is Metrolink? Well, we're the third largest regional rail network in the nation. We cover 545 route miles through 6 counties in Southern California, and half of the population lives within a 5-mile radius of our station. We've developed a very aggressive climate action plan that's charting a course towards a zero emissions future. And last year, we took the bold leap of ditching fossil fuels. So what's in our tanks today are renewable fuel. It's all natural fats, vegetable oils, no petroleum products. But we call this our bridge to zero. The technology around zero emissions is still uncertain. Is it going to be hydrogen, battery electric, or maybe some new unknown fuel that's not yet been developed? But what we know in this heavy engine sector is the road to zero is going to be long. But with respect to low-hanging fruit, the biggest emissions reduction you could use or do is the fuel that you don't use. And so I'm going to turn over to Michelle to talk to you about our pitch.
So as we started to look at different approaches that others in the sector have taken, we saw that a lot of the freight railroads were really pushing on trying to reduce the amount of fuel consumed, and that was a key part of their sustainability strategy. So it wasn't about necessarily turning over rolling stock, buying new equipment. A lot of it was really focused on trying to optimize the use of the existing equipment. So we started to think about that and figure out what would that look like. We already do a lot to try to manage our fuel consumption. We try to plug into the grid when we're in our rail yards, when we're maintaining the equipment, cleaning the equipment. We try to, whenever possible, turn off the engines if we're going to be at a layover point or at a station for a long period of time. But all those things, we want to go further. So earlier this year, we actually put together a grant application, and we were awarded $10 million from the state of California to try to advance this 3-tiered sort of project. So first, what we're going to be doing is a study, really inventorying the various technologies that are out there. We're already aware of some of them, the ones that the freights have employed, but we know that there's other ideas out there. And really, we're looking for a lot of different ideas. Some of these could take the form of software or even hardware sort of systems, but then a number of vendors are coming up with sort of analysis of engineer operation and trying to optimize the way that the equipment's actually handled. So sort of like a coaching type of program. We know that those programs exist as well. There might even be operational changes we can make. For instance, in the midday, if we're going to have fewer riders, maybe it's just a car or two worth of riders, we can shut down the HVAC and the lighting to some of the cars in the consist to really try to reduce our energy draw. There, of course, are challenges with doing that and really rolling that out, but those are the kinds of ideas that we're looking for. So we haven't started the study yet, but when we do, we'll want to get all the ideas. We want to see what's out there, because what we'll do is take those ideas and then look at the most promising of them, and then begin a pilot project, which will then ultimately lead into a fleet-wide implementation. So we think this really checks a lot of boxes for us. I mean, our fuel budget for the current year is $30 million, so even a 10% dent, which would be great, would be a considerable sort of impact for Metrolink. And of course, by not only saving money, we're also reducing the emissions that we're producing. So we think it really is a sweet spot for us, and we look forward to hearing the ideas that you may have.
Great, thank you. All right, if you guys can stay up on stage, and I'll call the rest of the panelists up. So do you have ideas around what's next for e-bikes, how to increase adoption and reduce emission from vehicles? Or Ideas for sustainable fuel. Solutions that have worked. I can share a question that you posed around the procurement reform with the curbside solutions. We run a process that essentially is a challenge-based procurement. So you go out to market with the challenges identified from transit agencies, and then you get startups from around the world to apply. And so this reverse procurement process has power. Happy to speak more about that. But do other people have ideas around the challenges posed?
Thank you. Oh, okay. So I work on a few e-bike lending library projects in LA County. So this is what my question is about, or maybe suggestion, even if, I don't know if you've worked on connecting with community-based partners or biking groups in the area. That's what has worked well in some of our e-bike lending libraries. But we have as well a few challenges with communities that are not bike prone, hilly areas. Sorry. Oh yeah, just wanted to know if you've tried some of those strategies.
Yeah, so our group funds a few different bike libraries throughout some of our more marginalized communities. Something I didn't reference is, as part of our climate protection fund, half of that has to go to marginalized communities that have been disenfranchised for so many years, and Denver's no different than most cities. So yes, we have some e-bike libraries there, and then we've also been considering that part of our microgrant program will potentially fund either e-bike libraries that are located at private businesses or community-based organizations, or at registered neighborhood organizations. We have a really great, robust trail system, and a lot of our communities abut them, and so the e-bike libraries make great sense there, and so definitely something we're interested in doing, but we also recognize there's a huge education piece to go along with it, and we're not necessarily built for that. We do our best to sort of give people the bare bones, but we're relying upon some of our partner organizations to sort of really drill down and help people learn about that. And also one thing is maintenance as well. That's a major thing that we're facing.
Other questions?
I don't want to dwell on e-bikes, but we have a rebate program. Can you talk about the structure of your program? Is it outright purchase, number one, or is it a rebate? And it's nice to get bikes in the hands of citizens, but how do you measure usage to figure out whether it is creating that transfer of VMT from vehicles to bikes?
Sure. So our program now, the amounts were higher last year, but this year they are $300 for a standard e-bike, $500 for an e-cargo bike if you are a general resident. If you are income qualified, it is $1,200 or $1,400. And so that'll get you, most of the way, for an income qualified individual, get you most of the way on a bike. So the way it works is that every other month, the fourth Tuesday of the month, people can go on and they go into our portal, they sign up, and it's first come, first serve. So usually they're gone within 5 minutes. We give away 900 every other month, and half of those are IQ, half of them are general. And then the way that we measure is we do a survey that goes out, I think it's going to start going out quarterly, and we're just asking people to report either what their odometer says, what the miles are that they think they believe that they do roughly every day, and how much they do a week. And so then we're able to kind of extrapolate that data, but it's really just the onus is on the people to report as best as they can. We don't have any tracking or anything like that. One area where we can do it is we have an extremely robust Lyft and Lime bike and scooter share program, and we're able to utilize all of that data. And so that is one area where we're able to sort of fill in some gaps for ourselves.
Other questions?
Thanks. This is a question for Michelle and Lisa. How are you currently tracking, are you publicizing the GHG and fuel savings that you're capturing, and how are you measuring that?
Against our climate action plan, we're doing annual reporting of our GHG reductions, but it's not going into the details about fuel consumption or the minute details on fuel efficiency. It's overall general categories. So I don't know if that answers. And obviously, the greenhouse protocol, that's what we're following for carbon accounting.
Yeah, I think one of the areas that we're hoping to get better visibility over would be if one of the systems we'd like to try would be more robust remote monitoring, so that we can understand, I mean, this is probably more granular than what you're asking, but instances of idling over a certain period of time, because our system's so vast. We have equipment potentially out at layover locations, of which there are very few folks staffing those locations, but we don't know that equipment might be running for hours. We want to know that, so that we can better sort of manage and make sure that we sort of enforce our policies when we don't see them right at our main rail yard, but when it's happening sort of off-site. So those are the types of things that we're looking to get a better grasp on. I mean, we have some of the data, but for our older equipment, trying to get the megawatt hours or kilowatt hours of use, it's like a manual process. You're getting on the equipment, you're taking a reading at the beginning of the year, and then you'd have to get on at the end of the year to do that too, track down all the equipment across the system to do that. And that's, of course, really clunky. So those are the types of improvements just to get better. Part of this project is really intended to also give us better data, so that we can understand how we utilize our equipment and try to find efficiencies.
Question for Charles. I picked up on one point in the presentation that wasn't the main focus of the presentation, that Montreal's got the first all-electric taxi fleet in North America. Very impressive.
Yes,
interested to learn how that's operated by the city, what kind of charging infrastructure you're providing to those taxi drivers, and maybe what the future plan is to improve, optimize, or grow that fleet.
Right. Actually, Theo Taxi was a bit advanced on its time. It was run, actually, it was not public, it was private. Eventually, the company, they overestimated probably what the efficiency of a fully electric and all the complexity of having a fully electric company. So actually, the company folded and then was purchased by another taxi company, which is operating now. That brought many elements to consider in terms of deploying the EV charging station. As you saw, we have about 1,500 EV charging stations. 83% is on the curb, which is not viable. But we know that most taxi stands in Montreal, they're all on the street. So it brings the question, should we continue deploying the EV charging station? Should we allocate charging station for only taxis? Because eventually the plan for 2035 is that, as we all know, all cars will be electric, and the city of Montreal would like to actually convert, be more aggressive and convert the entire taxi fleet to electric by 2030. So right now the city wants to multiply by 10 the number of charging stations. They're all level 2. Well, we have a few level 3. We will, and as you know, level 3 stations are quite big. And so what we're doing now is actually the city of Montreal possess, as like every other cities, quite a lot of public parking, off-street parking. But those parking lots for libraries, sports center, activity, whatever, they're mostly empty all the time. And so we're trying to convert those. We've inventoried about 1,000 of these lots. We believe that about 500 can be converted to mobility hubs. In those hubs, you will find EV charging, level 3, some level 2. Big C is going 4 seasons this year for the first time in 15 years. It's quite a challenge, as you can imagine, with Montreal's weather. So there will be, right now, most Big C stations are actually on street, so they will now go off street. There's also EV Big C, electric Big C. That too needs to be deployed in those future mobility hubs. I showed Communoto, the car share program. We have about 4,000 cars. It's a nonprofit, but they don't have any more space off street. They need to go. They need to find new spaces. So they either went on street with the flex model, where you can just take a car as it goes. Problem with that is that residents, they don't like to see those car share taking their residents parking. So anyway, those mobility hubs will be deployed. City wants to deploy about 150 over the next 5 years, and this is where all these different mode of transportation will actually converge and be placed. And I'll end with this last element. Those hubs actually will be converted to eco-responsible. So there will be rainwater management. There will be plantation of trees. All sort of, there'll be some parcel lockers too. So all these hubs will actually become real mobility tools, real infrastructure, which actually what parking should be. It is a transportation infrastructure that nobody cares about. And there's nothing more banal than putting a piece of 1 ton of metal in a spot, So that's it. I hope I answered the question.
Tell us how you really feel. We might have time for one quick burning question.
I would just say it was really interesting seeing what's going on in Montreal. I was just curious in terms of if there's what people think about the more integrated these apps are, the better, but the more city focused they are, it's challenging if you're like a visitor or moving around or something like that. So if they ever look to partner with like an Uber or something like that, because I think one of the benefits of the bigger players is that you can just go anywhere and you got that easy interface through the app.
So yeah, excellent question or comment. Actually, the strategy we have on the information side is actually, yes, we will develop our app. The problem with motorists right now is that payment app, they open it at the very end of their trip. So we cannot, what I call, have this dialogue with the motorists. Contrary to the transit user, the bike, the cyclist, the taxi, they will all open their app and order and plan their trip in advance. Motorists, they navigate. They don't plan their trip. They will look at Google Maps, say, oh, there's traffic, and they'll just go in the traffic, and there's nothing else. So essentially, the idea is actually to provide this information on parking. This is like the carrot, in a way. It's the incentive for them to open the app. Once they have opened the app, we can say, you can go there. We recommend that you go maybe not exactly where you wanted to go, maybe a few blocks where you will find parking. We predict parking. But we also, it's the moment where we can actually interact and push them multimodal information too, which no mass right now does that. Everybody thinks that just creating the mass will switch people. Now, to answer your question, we will have our app, but we will also have open payment. For exactly the example you gave, like tourists, when they come to the city, if you use passport, open payment, open parking, you can just use the app that you use in your city. At that point, the problem is more of a communication problem. How do you communicate all the apps that you can use in Montreal? But so the specs should come out. Our app should be deployed, start to be deployed next year. It's an ongoing project, and at that moment, we'll also publish a spec manual where app providers can actually, just connect and offer their service. But your point is excellent. The app it cannot only be one app.
Great. Well, we are at time, so thank you all. Thank you to our panelists. Give a round of applause.
Thank you.
And please make your way to the leadership stage. At 9 a.m., we have another exciting discussion there. And of course, feel free to speak with the panelists if you have ideas or